You're in danger. Pretend I'm your husband, Vampire King whispered. What happened next? Shocked. Chapter 1. The night market runs red. The night market smelled of rain and rotting fruit. Elena pressed herself against the cold stone wall of an alley, her breath coming in shallow gasps that misted in the October air. Her hands trembled not from cold, but from the weight of the choice she'd made 3 hours ago when she'd walked out of Marcus's apartment for the last time. His voice still echoing behind her. You're nothing without me. You'll come crawling back. She wouldn't. She'd rather sleep on park benches than return to that gilded cage. The market sprawled before her, a labyrinth of canvas stalls and hanging lanterns that cast dancing shadows across cobblestones slick with recent rain. Vendors hawked their wares: spiced wine, leather-bound books, strange herbs bundled with red thread. Elena had come here seeking anonymity, a place to disappear into the crowd while she figured out where to go next. She hadn't expected to stumble into a killing. It happened so quickly she almost missed it. A woman in a velvet cloak, defined for this part of the city, moved through the crowd with predatory grace. Elena watched her pause beside a young man examining silver jewelry at a stall. The woman leaned close, whispered something. The man's eyes went glassy, unfocused. Then the woman's hand was at his throat. Elena's scream died in her chest as she saw the blood dark and arterial spray across the jewelry display. The woman's mouth was at the man's neck, and the wrongness of it struck Elena like a physical blow. This wasn't a mugging. This was something else entirely. The woman's head snapped up. Her eyes met Elena's across 20 feet of crowded market. Those eyes were wrong. Too bright, too old, too knowing. Elena ran. She didn't think, didn't plan, just turned and fled into the maze of alleys behind the market. Her boots slipped on wet stone. Her lungs burned. Behind her, she heard no footsteps, no pursuit. But she felt it anyway, that crawling sensation of being hunted. She rounded a corner and collided with something solid. Arms caught her before she could fall. Strong arms, wrapped in dark wool that smelled of cedar and old paper. Elena tried to pull away, but the grip tightened, not painfully, but with absolute certainty. Be still. The voice was male, low, and carried an accent she couldn't place. British, perhaps, but older. Refined in a way that spoke of different centuries. Elena looked up into a face that made her breath catch for entirely different reasons than fear. He was beautiful in the way old churches were. Beautiful, all sharp angles and cold symmetry. His hair was dark, pulled back from a face too pale for health, and his eyes, God, his eyes were the gray of winter storms, and they were looking at her with an intensity that made her feel pinned like a butterfly to velvet. You saw something you shouldn't have, he said. It wasn't a question. Let me go. Elena's voice shook, but she forced steel into it. She'd learned that much from 2 years with Marcus. Never let them hear the fear. I would. But she's coming. He tilted his head slightly, listening to something Elena couldn't hear. And if I let you go now, you'll die screaming in approximately 45 seconds. Elena's blood went cold. Who are you? Someone who finds himself in the unlikely position of wanting to prevent your death. His lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. Consider yourself fortunate. I rarely involve myself in mortal affairs. Mortal. The word hung between them like smoke. Before Elena could process it, he moved. One moment they were standing in the alley. The next, he'd pulled her into a recessed doorway, his body a wall between her and the alley entrance. His hand covered her mouth, not roughly, but firmly enough that she couldn't make a sound. Don't move, he breathed against her ear. Don't breathe. Don't even think loudly. The woman from the market appeared at the alley entrance. She was even more wrong up close. Her beauty was too perfect, too symmetrical, like a painting that had been retouched until all humanity was erased. Blood stained her mouth, and when she smiled, Elena saw teeth that were just slightly too sharp. Dominic. The woman's voice was silk wrapped around a blade. Still playing knight to broken mortals? How disappointingly predictable. The man holding Elena, Dominic, didn't move. She's under my protection, Lisette. Walk away. Protection? Lisette laughed, and the sound made Elena's skin crawl. She saw Dominic. You know the law. Witnesses don't walk away from the night court. She'll remember nothing. I'll make certain of it. Will you? Lisette took a step closer. Or will you keep her, like you kept the others? How did that work out for you last time? Something dangerous flickered in Dominic's expression, a flash of old pain, quickly shuddered. I said walk away, Lisette. Unless you want to explain to Matthias why you killed a human under House Ashwood's protection in the middle of a treaty negotiation, The name Matthias made Lisette pause. Elena felt the shift in the air, saw the calculation in those two bright eyes. House Ashwood, Lisette repeated slowly. You're claiming her formally? I am. Matthias will have questions. Let him ask them. For a long moment, the two stared at each other, predators weighing risk and reward. Then Lisette smiled, showing all her teeth. Very well. But when he discovers she's nothing but a stray you picked up out of misplaced guilt, she shrugged. Well, that won't be my concern. She turned and disappeared into the shadows so completely that Elena wondered if she'd ever been there at all. Dominic didn't move for another 30 seconds. When he finally released Elena, she stumbled back against the wall, her mind reeling. What the hell was that? That, Dominic said quietly, was the beginning of a very dangerous complication. He studied her with those winter storm eyes. What's your name? Elena. The word came out automatically. Elena, he repeated it like he was testing the weight of it. I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you have anywhere safe to go tonight? Elena thought of Marcus's apartment, of the friends who'd stopped calling when she'd chosen him over them, of the family she hadn't spoken to in 18 months. No, she whispered. Dominic closed his eyes briefly, as if steeling himself against a decision he already regretted. When he opened them again, there was something resigned in his expression. Then you're coming with me. Because I've just claimed you under house law, which means you're now my responsibility until the next new moon. He offered his hand, pale, long-fingered, steady. And if you stay out here alone, Lisette will come back the moment I'm gone, and she'll do worse than kill you. Elena stared at his outstretched hand. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to refuse, to take her chances alone, but she'd seen what Lisette was. And she'd heard the truth in Dominic's voice when he'd said she would die. She took his hand. His skin was cold as marble. Chapter 3. The things he doesn't. Idalina didn't sleep. How could she? Every creak of the old house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow seemed to move with purpose. She lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the impossible events of the night until they blurred into nightmare logic. When dawn broke, pale and gray through the windows, she felt something shift in the house, a settling, as if the building itself had exhaled. He sleeps during the day. The thought made her skin prickle. Somewhere in the east wing, Dominic lay. What? Dead? Unconscious? She didn't know the mechanics of vampirism, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. She rose, showered away the grime of the previous night, and opened the wardrobe Dominic had mentioned. The clothes inside were beautiful silk blouses in jewel tones, soft sweaters, jeans that looked expensive, all in her size, which was somehow more unsettling than if they'd been wrong. She pulled on black pants and a deep green sweater, trying not to think about the woman who'd worn them before. Asked too many questions, Elena braided her damp hair and ventured into the corridor. The house felt different in daylight. Less gothic drama, more faded grandeur. She found the kitchen on the first floor, a massive room with modern appliances retrofitted into a space that had clearly once relied on hearth fires and servants. The refrigerator was, as promised, fully stocked. Fresh fruit, vegetables, cheese, bread, everything a human might need. But no coffee, no tea, nothing that required warmth to consume. She made herself toast and ate it, standing by the window, watching the gardens come into focus as the sun rose higher. Roses, dormant for winter, stone pathways, a fountain, dry and still, beautiful, empty, like a museum. Elena spent the morning exploring. The library was exactly where Dominic had said it would be, a 2-story room lined, floor to ceiling with books that smelled of leather and time. She ran her fingers along the spines, reading titles in languages she didn't recognize. Latin, French, something that might have been Old English. One shelf held modern novels, fiction, as if Dominic ancient, immortal Dominic spent his nights reading paperback thrillers. The image made him suddenly, startlingly human. She pulled a book at random and settled into a leather chair by the window. Tried to read, couldn't focus. Her eyes kept drifting to the east wing, visible through the window across the courtyard. The windows there were shuttered, completely dark. I prefer not to be disturbed. Elena set the book aside and wandered further. She found a music room with a grand piano, its keys dusty from disuse. A dining room with a table that could seat 20, set with china that looked centuries old. A conservatory filled with dead plants and beautiful pots. Everything spoke of a life once lived fully, now abandoned. In the portrait gallery, she stopped before a painting that made her breath catch. It showed a young woman, perhaps 20, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to follow Elena across the room. She wore a dress from another century, all empire waist and delicate lace, and she was smiling. Not the formal smile of a posed portrait, but something genuine and warm. The nameplate read, Catherine Ashwood. 18-3, the year Dominic had mentioned the coffin. Elena stared at the painting for a long time, memorizing the curve of Catherine's smile, the intelligence in her eyes. Had she lived here? Had she been family? Or something else? Behind her, a clock chimed noon, halfway through the day. Halfway until Dominic woke, Elena realized with a start that she was waiting for him. A tea for o'clock. She was in the kitchen making tea when she heard it. Footsteps, soft but distinct. Her heart kicked into overdrive. Too early. The sun's still up, but when she turned, it wasn't Dominic in the doorway. It was a woman, older, human, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and eyes that assessed Elena with sharp intelligence. So you're the new one, the woman said. Her accent was crisp, British. I'm Mrs. Carlyle. I manage the house. Elena's hand tightened on the teacup. I didn't know anyone else lived here. I don't live here. I come during the day to manage things. Mr. Ashwood can't. Mrs. Carlyle moved into the kitchen with practiced ease, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. You'll be wanting dinner, I expect. You know what he is? I've worked for House Ashwood for 40 years, Miss Elena. Miss Elena. Mrs. Carlyle began chopping vegetables with efficient precision. I know exactly what Mr. Ashwood is, and I know he doesn't extend his protection lightly. Whatever you witnessed, whatever brought you here, you're safe under this roof. Safer than anywhere else in the city, I'd wager. Elena watched her work, questions crowding her tongue. The woman in the portrait, Catherine, who is she? Mrs. Carlyle's hands stilled for just a moment. Someone he loved, someone he lost. She resumed chopping. And before you ask, no, I won't tell you more. That's his story to share if he chooses, he said. The woman who wore these clothes asked him many questions. Did he? Mrs. Carlyle's lips quirked. Then perhaps you should take the hint. Or perhaps, she glanced at Elena, something speculative in her gaze. Perhaps you're different than the others. What others? The strays he's collected over the years. The humans who stumbled into things they shouldn't have seen. Most of them spent their 28 days terrified, counting down the hours until they could leave. Mrs. Carlyle slid the vegetables into a pan. But you're not terrified, are you? You're curious. Elena wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. He's dangerous, she said instead. Very. Mrs. Carlyle agreed. But not to you. Not unless you force his hand. Mr. Ashwood has more control than anyone I've ever met, vampire or human. It's both his greatest strength and his deepest wound. Before Elena could ask what that meant, a shadow fell across the kitchen doorway. Dominic stood there, perfectly still, perfectly composed. He wore dark pants and a gray shirt, his hair damp, as if he'd just showered. But his feet were bare, and somehow that small detail made him seem less monster, more man. Mrs. Carlyle, he said quietly. Thank you for coming. Of course, Mr. Ashwood. The older woman's voice softened. Dinner will be ready in 30 minutes. For Miss Elena, she added pointedly. Dominic's eyes flicked to Elena, and she saw something complicated move through his expression. You slept poorly. It wasn't a question. Elena wondered how he could tell the shadows under her eyes. The tension in her shoulders? Hard to sleep when you don't know if you'll wake up, she said. I gave you my word you were safe. You also said the last person here asked him many questions. What happened to them? Silence stretched between them. Mrs. Carlyle had gone very still at her stove. Finally, Dominic said, she left, alive, unharmed, with her memories intact and a substantial sum of money to start over somewhere far from here. His voice dropped. I don't hurt the people I protect, Elena, ever. But you wanted to warn me anyway. Yes. He stepped into the kitchen, and Elena noticed he kept his distance, a careful 3 feet between them. Because curiosity can be as dangerous as fear. And you, I suspect, have an abundance of both. Elena lifted her chin. If I'm going to be trapped here for a month, I deserve to understand what I'm trapped with. Something flashed in Dominic's eyes. Approval, maybe. Or recognition. Very well, he said softly. After dinner, the library. And I'll answer 3 questions. Choose them wisely. He turned and left before she could respond. Mrs. Carlyle chuckled. Different, she murmured. Definitely different. Chapter 2. The House of Ashen Secrets. Dominic's car was not what Elena expected. She'd half imagined something gothic and archaic, a horse-drawn carriage, perhaps with velvet curtains and the smell of old blood. Instead, he led her to a sleek black sedan parked 3 blocks from the market. Its interior leather and modern and utterly mundane. You seem disappointed, he observed, as he opened the passenger door. Elena slid inside, her wet clothes sticking to the seat. I don't know what I expected. Something with more coffins, presumably. His tone was dry as he circled to the driver's side. I'm afraid I haven't used a coffin since 1883, and even then it was only because the hotel had misplaced my luggage. The engine purred to life. Elena watched the city lights blur past as they drove through streets that grew progressively quieter, more exclusive. Her mind kept replaying the scene in the alley, the blood, Lisette's inhuman eyes, the casual way Dominic had spoken of laws and houses and mortals. What are you? The question escaped before she could stop it. Dominic's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the steering wheel. You know what I am, Elena. You're simply hoping you're wrong. Vampires aren't real. No? He glanced at her, and in the dashboard light, his eyes reflected like an animal's. Then what did you see Lisette doing in the market? Elena's throat closed. She'd seen the blood, the teeth, the impossible speed. This isn't happening, she whispered. I'm afraid it is. His voice softened slightly. And I understand the instinct to deny it. Most humans do, right until the moment they can't anymore. But denial won't keep you safe, and you need to be safe. At least until the treaty is finalized. What treaty? One that doesn't concern you. Yet. He turned onto a private road lined with iron gates and old trees. What concerns you now is understanding the situation you've stumbled into. You witnessed a breach of the covenant, the law that keeps my kind hidden from yours. Normally, that would be a death sentence. But I've claimed you under house protection, which means Lisette can't touch you without risking war between our houses. Elena processed this slowly. So I'm, what, a hostage? A guest. The distinction seemed important to him. Under my protection for the next lunar cycle. 28 days. After that, if you've told no one what you've seen and posed no threat to the covenant, you'll be released with your memories intact. And if I run? Then you void my protection, and Lisette will find you within the hour. He said it without malice, simply stating fact. She's very good at hunting. The car stopped before a gate that opened silently at their approach. Beyond it stretched a gravel drive leading to a house that made Elena's breath catch. Despite everything, it wasn't a mansion, it was something older, grander. A stone manor that seemed to have grown from the earth itself, all Gothic arches and ivy-covered walls and windows that glowed with warm light. Beautiful and terrible, and utterly out of time. Welcome, Dominic said quietly, to Ashwood Manor. Inside, the house was a study in contrasts. The entry hall soared 3 stories high. Its walls lined with portraits of stern-faced men and women in clothing that spanned centuries. But the furniture was modern, comfortable, and a fire crackled in an enormous hearth that filled the space with warmth. Elena stood dripping on marble floors, acutely aware of her damp jeans and the mascara she could feel running down her cheeks. She must look like a drowned rat. Dominic shed his coat with economical movements, revealing a dark shirt that fit him like it had been tailored specifically for his frame. Probably had been. Everything about him spoke of wealth worn so long it had become invisible. You're cold. He didn't ask, just stated it. Come. He led her through corridors lined with closed doors, up a curved staircase, to a bedroom that could have swallowed her entire apartment. The bed was enormous, draped in charcoal gray linens. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens she couldn't quite see in the darkness. This is yours for the duration. Dominic moved to a door Elena hadn't noticed, opening it to reveal a bathroom lined with white marble. There are clothes in the wardrobe they belong to someone else. They should fit well enough. Elena heard what he didn't say in that pause. Someone who didn't survive knowing what you now know. The house is warded, he continued. You can't leave the grounds without me, so don't attempt it. But you're free to move about inside. The kitchen is stocked. The library is on the 2nd floor. I ask only that you don't enter the east wing. Why not? His expression shuddered. Because I sleep there during the day, and I prefer not to be disturbed. Right. Because he was a vampire, who slept during the day. This was her life now. I'll leave you to rest. Dominic moved toward the door, then paused. Elena, I know this is overwhelming, but you're safe here. I give you my word. Why should I trust your word? He turned back, and for a moment something ancient and sad flickered across his features. Because 200 years ago, I failed to protect someone. I should have. And I've spent every night since trying to make that failure mean something. His voice dropped. I won't fail again. Before she could respond, he was gone, the door closing with a soft click. Elena stood alone in the borrowed room, her mind spinning. She should be terrified. She was terrified. But underneath the fear was something else, a strange, reckless curiosity. Who had lived in this room before her? Who had worn the clothes in that wardrobe? And what had happened to them? She moved to the window, pressing her palm against cold glass. Beyond the gardens, she could see the lights of the city glowing in the distance. Her old life, the apartment she'd shared with Marcus, the job she'd quit when he'd asked her to, the friends she'd lost, all of it felt like it belonged to someone else now. Behind her, she heard the faintest sound, not quite footsteps, but a presence. She turned to find Dominic standing in the doorway again, a bundle of dark fabric in his hands. I forgot to bring towels, he said, but he didn't move to set them down. He just stood there, looking at her with those winter gray eyes, and Elena saw something in his expression that made her chest tighten. He looked lonely, not dangerous, not predatory, just alone in a way that transcended the physical space between them. The woman in the market, Elena heard herself say. Did you know her, Lisette? Yes, we were acquainted once. His jaw tightened. Before she chose House Corvin over House Ashwood, before she decided that the old laws were negotiable, and the person who lived here before me. Dominic's eyes darkened, asked him many questions, just like you're doing now. He set the towels on a chair and left without another word, but Elena saw his hands shake before he closed the door. Chapter 4. 3 questions in the dark. Dinner was silent. Mrs. Carlyle had prepared roasted chicken with root vegetables and fresh bread, then departed with a knowing look that made Elena's cheeks warm. She ate alone at the enormous dining table, hyper-aware of every sound, the scrape of her fork, the creak of floorboards overhead, the distant ticking of clocks throughout the house. Dominic didn't eat. Of course he didn't, but when she carried her plate to the kitchen, she found him there, reading a newspaper at the counter, with a glass of red wine beside him. He looked up as she entered. You didn't have to eat alone, he said quietly. I may not require food, but I remember how to keep someone company during a meal. Elena set her plate in the sink. I didn't want to make it awkward, as opposed to the comfort and ease of our current situation. His tone was dry, but there was a hint of amusement beneath it. Despite everything, Elena felt her lips twitch. Fair point. Dominic closed the newspaper. The library then. You have questions. I promised answers. The library looked different at night. Gas lamps, actual gas lamps, converted to electricity but maintaining their antique charm, cast pools of amber light across the room. Rain had begun to fall outside, drumming against the windows in a rhythm that felt almost hypnotic. Dominic gestured to the leather chairs by the fireplace. Elena sat, tucking her legs beneath her, while he remained standing, a deliberate choice, she suspected. Maintaining distance, control. 3 questions, he reminded her. Ask carefully. Elena had spent the afternoon considering this moment. She could ask about vampire physiology, about the houses and their politics, about the covenant. All practical questions. But what came out was, who was Catherine? Dominic went very still. For a long moment, he didn't speak, and Elena thought he might refuse to answer. Then he moved to the window, his back to her, silhouette, dark against the rain-streaked glass. Catherine was my younger sister, he said finally. Human, mortal, beautiful in all the ways that matter, kind, curious, stubborn as hell. His voice softened with old affection. I was turned in 1804, during the Napoleonic Wars. A battlefield mistake, a vampire feeding indiscriminately on dying soldiers. I survived, changed. When I returned home, I thought I could continue as I had been, manage the estate, protect my family. He paused, and Elena heard the weight of centuries in his silence. Catherine was the only one who wasn't afraid of me. She saw what I'd become and loved me anyway. Insisted I was still her brother, still Dominic, despite, he gestured vaguely at himself. She stayed here, in this house, kept me human in the ways that mattered. Until 1823. What happened in 1823? That's your second question. Dominic turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes was raw enough to make her chest ache. A rival vampire, older, crueler than I could have imagined, discovered I had a human sister I loved. He used her to draw me out, threatened to turn her, to make her like us, unless I surrendered territory he wanted. His hands clenched at his sides. I tried to negotiate, tried to buy her safety with alliances and gold and every resource I possessed. But he turned her anyway, just to prove he could. Elena's breath caught. She became a vampire? For 3 days. She was 22 years old, and the change was wrong. Her mind fractured under the weight of immortality. She begged me to end it. Dominic's voice had gone flat, emotionless. The only way, Elena suspected, he could speak these words at all. So I did. I held her while she died a second time, and I swore I would never again let someone I was meant to protect suffer for my failures. The room felt too small suddenly, too full of old grief. I'm sorry, Elena whispered. Don't be. It was 200 years ago, but his voice betrayed him, still wounded, still bleeding. I've had plenty of time to make peace with it. Have you? Dominic's laugh was bitter. No, but I've gotten better at pretending. He moved to the fireplace, bracing one hand against the mantel. You have one question left. Elena watched him, this ancient, damaged creature who'd saved her life for reasons she still didn't understand. Who kept Mrs. Carlyle employed, though he didn't need anyone. Who filled his house with books and music and empty rooms. Why did you really claim me? She asked. Lisette killed someone right in front of witnesses. One more human seeing something they shouldn't. Why does it matter? Dominic was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he turned, and the look in his eyes made her breath stop. Because you reminded me of her, he said simply. Catherine. The way you stood in that alley, terrified but defiant. The way you looked at me, not with worship or disgust, but with assessment, as if you were trying to decide whether I was worth trusting. He shook his head. It was foolish, sentimental, precisely the kind of emotional decision that gets humans killed in my world. But I couldn't let Lisette have you. Not when I could prevent it. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. So I'm what? A replacement sister? No, the word came out sharp. You're nothing like that. He seemed to struggle for words. You're a complication I should have walked away from. But I've learned that the things we should walk away from are often the things we most need to face. Rain drummed harder against the windows. In the firelight, Dominic looked younger somehow, or perhaps just more vulnerable. Less monster, more man who'd carried grief too long. My turn, he said quietly. I answered your questions honestly. Now answer mine. What were you running from when you came to the night market? Elena tensed. She hadn't expected this reversal. A man, she said finally. Marcus. My ex. He was controlling, made me give up my job, my friends, everything that made me feel like myself. Told me I needed him, that I was nothing without him. The words tasted bitter. I finally left 3 hours before I saw Lisette. I had nowhere to go, no plan, just needed to be anywhere he wasn't. Dominic's expression darkened. Did he hurt you? Not physically, just. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. He made me small. Made me doubt everything I knew about myself. And I let him, because some broken part of me believed he was right. You're not broken. Dominic's voice was fierce. You're healing. There's a difference. Elena looked up at him, surprised by the intensity in his tone. How would you know? Because I've been healing for 200 years. He moved closer, not threatening, just present. And I recognized the look of someone who survived something that should have destroyed them. You're stronger than you think, Elena. Strong enough to walk away from someone who tried to make you forget your own power. That takes courage most people never find. Something warm and unexpected bloomed in Elena's chest. Thank you, she whispered. Dominic nodded once, then stepped back, rebuilding the careful distance between them. It's late. You should rest. Tomorrow? He hesitated. Tomorrow I'll teach you the basics of house law. What you need to know to survive the next 27 days. Dominic? He paused at the doorway. Your sister, Elena said softly. I think she'd be proud of who you became. Even with all the grief, for a moment, Dominic's mask slipped completely. The pain, the loneliness, the desperate hope that Catherine's death had meant something, all of it naked in his expression. Good night, Elena, he said roughly, and then he was gone. Chapter 5. The house that Hunselina dreamed of. Catherine Ashwood. In the dream, the young woman from the portrait stood in the garden, her empire waist dress glowing white in moonlight. She turned smiling, and her eyes were the same winter gray as her brother's. He's been alone too long, Catherine said, her voice carrying across impossible distance. Don't let him stay that way. Ellen awoke with a gasp, her heart racing. The room was still dark to dark for morning. She reached for her phone on the nightstand. 3:47 a.m. She groaned and rolled over, trying to recapture sleep. Then she heard it. Glass shattering. Downstairs, Elena shot upright, her pulse thundering in her ears. For a frozen moment, she didn't move, didn't breathe, listening with every fiber of her being. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Moving through the house with purpose. Her door flew open. Dominic stood there, fully dressed, his face a mask of cold fury. Get up, now, don't make a sound. Elena scrambled out of bed, her hands shaking. What's happening? House Corvin. They've breached the wards. He grabbed her arm not roughly, but with absolute certainty and pulled her into the hallway. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Elena nodded, too terrified to speak. They moved through the darkened corridor, Dominic's hand steady on her wrist. Elena could hear voices now low, mocking, speaking in a language that sounded like French, but older, twisted. Dominic Ashwood, a voice called from below. Male, cultured, cruel, playing house with mortals again? Have you learned nothing? Dominic's jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. Instead, he guided Elena to a narrow door she'd never noticed hidden in the wood paneling. It opened onto a servant's staircase, steep and dark. Down, he whispered. The wine cellar. There's a safe room behind the 1947 vintages. Get inside and don't come out until I get you. What about you? I'll handle this. Dominic, he cupped her face with both hands, and the tenderness of the gesture nearly undid her. Elena, I have survived centuries of vampire politics. I will survive this. But I need to know you're safe, please. The voices were getting closer. Elena heard footsteps on the main staircase. Go, Dominic said, and pushed her gently toward the stairs. Elena went. The wine cellar was exactly as Dominic described, rows of dusty bottles organized by year, the air cool and still. Elena found the 1947 section, her hands trembling as she searched for the safe room. There a seam in the stone wall, barely visible. She pressed, and a panel swung inward, revealing a small space lined with supplies. Water, blankets, a first aid kit that looked medical grade. How many times has he needed this? Elena slipped inside and pulled the panel closed just as she heard voices above. Telling you, Matthias, he brought her here. I smelled her the moment we entered. That was Lisette's voice, sharp with satisfaction. A human under house protection. The council will be very interested. The council approved my claim, Dominic said, his voice carrying through the floorboards. Calm, controlled, utterly cold. You're violating treaty law by entering my home uninvited. Treaty law. The male voice. Matthias laughed. Tell me, Dominic, does the treaty account for humans who witness unauthorized feeds? Who see things they shouldn't? Or did you conveniently forget to mention that detail when you filed your protection claim? Silence. Elena pressed her hand over her mouth, forcing her breathing to slow. I thought so, Matthias continued. You've always been weak for strays, haven't you? Catherine taught you nothing. The sound that came from Dominic was barely human, a snarl that made Elena's blood run cold. Don't. His voice was lethal. Don't speak her name in this house. Or what? You'll challenge me? Matthias sounded amused. You're outnumbered 4-1, Ashwood. And while you've been playing hermit in this mausoleum, House Corvin has been building alliances. The old families are tired of your neutrality. They want the territory you're wasting on sentiment and memories. Then they're welcome to try taking it. Movement above. Fast. Violent. Elena heard furniture breaking. The crash of something heavy hitting the floor. She wanted to run up there, to help somehow. But Dominic's words echoed in her mind. I need to know you're safe. So she stayed frozen in the dark, listening to the sounds of a battle she couldn't see. It lasted less than 3 minutes. When silence finally fell, Elena's entire body was shaking. She didn't know who'd won. Didn't know if Dominic was alive or destroyed or the cellar door open. Elena, Dominic's voice, rough but steady. It's safe. She pushed the panel open and stumbled out, to find him standing at the base of the stairs. His shirt was torn, his blood staining the fabric. But he was upright, alive. Are you hurt? She reached for him without thinking. It's nothing. Already healing. But he swayed slightly, betraying the lie. Elena looked past him up the stairs. The others? Gone. For now. Dominic leaned against the wine rack, exhaustion finally showing through his controlled exterior. Matthias isn't foolish enough to kill me in my own home to many political consequences. This was a message, a warning, that House Corvin is watching. What do they want? You, me, this territory. He closed his eyes briefly. Everything I've worked to centuries to protect. And they'll use you to get it if they can. Elena felt cold settle into her bones. I'm the weakness. That's what Matthias meant. No, Dominic's eyes snapped open, fierce and certain. You're not a weakness. You're a complication they didn't expect. And that makes you dangerous to them. I don't understand. Neither do I. Not yet. He pushed away from the rack, wincing. But I know this Matthias wouldn't have come himself unless he perceived a real threat. And the only new variable in this equation is you. Elena wanted to argue, to insist she was just a human who'd seen the wrong thing at the wrong time. But the intensity in Dominic's gaze stopped her. What happens now? She asked instead. Now we prepare. Dominic started up the stairs, gesturing for her to follow. Because House Corvin won't stop with warnings. They'll come again, and next time they'll bring enough force to overwhelm my defenses. We have perhaps 3 days before the next attack. 3 days to do what? Dominic looked back at her, and something almost like a smile touched his lips, grim and determined. 3 days to teach you how to survive in a world at war, he said. Starting with the most important lesson. In vampire politics, the humans are never innocent bystanders. You're either an asset or a liability. And I intend to make you the former. They emerged into the main hall to find it destroyed, furniture overturned, portraits torn from walls, the beautiful space reduced to chaos. In the center of the destruction, written in what looked like ash across the marble floor, were 3 words: she dies. Next, Elena stared at the message, her fear crystallizing into something harder, anger. Teach me, she said quietly, whatever I need to know. I'm done being helpless. Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Tomorrow we start training. Tonight, he surveyed the wreckage. Tonight we clean up this mess. Together. Chapter 6. Blood Oaths and Ancient Laws. Dawn broke cold and gray over Ashwood Manor. Elena stood in the conservatory, now cleared of dead plants and converted into what Dominic called a war room, watching him arrange papers across a salvage table, maps, documents, written in languages she couldn't read. Photographs of stern-faced vampires who looked like they'd stepped from different centuries. He'd changed clothes, the torn shirt replaced by a simple black sweater. The wounds from last night had already healed, leaving only faint marks on his pale skin. Watching him move, fluid, economical, utterly controlled, Elena found it hard to reconcile this creature with the man who'd spoken of his sister with such raw grief. You should have slept, Dominic said without looking up. So should you. I don't sleep well after violence. He finally met her eyes. Old habit. Catherine used to make me tea and sit with me until dawn, after difficult nights. She said talking helped more than silence. Elena moved closer to the table. Then talk. Explain what I'm caught in the middle of. Dominic gestured to a chair. When Elena sat, he remained standing, always maintaining that careful distance. Vampire society is structured around houses, he began. Bloodlines, essentially. Each house controls territory, resources, and humans under its protection. There are laws, the covenant, that govern interactions between houses and with the mortal world, the most important of which is secrecy. Humans cannot know we exist, except I do, except you witnessed a covenant breach. Lisette fed openly in a public market. That alone should have resulted in her execution. But House Corvin is powerful, and Matthias protected her by claiming the kill was strategic, eliminating a threat to vampire security. Dominic's expression darkened. It was a lie. She fed because she wanted to. Because she's grown reckless under Matthias's protection. Elena absorbed this. And you claiming me? Complicated things. By formally declaring you under House Ashwood protection, I invoked an ancient law, the right of sanctuary. For 1 lunar cycle, you're untouchable. Any vampire who harms you harms me, and any house that harms me risks war with my allies. So I'm leverage. You're supposed to be. Dominic pulled out a photograph. Matthias. She realized, though he looked nothing like the monster from last night. In the photo, he wore a tailored suit and smiled like a businessman closing a deal. But something's wrong. Matthias shouldn't risk treaty violations for 1 human witness. House Corvin has been careful to maintain political relationships, to position themselves as the future of vampire governance. This aggression is unlike him. Elena studied the photograph. Matthias looked urbane, sophisticated, entirely civilized. The kind of predator who'd shake your hand before ripping out your throat. What does he really want? That's what I haven't figured out. Dominic set the photo aside. But I can tell you what we're dealing with. House Corvin controls most of the eastern territories. They've absorbed smaller houses through alliances and strategic marriages. Yes, vampires marry, though not for love. They're expansionist, ambitious, and they see my neutrality as weakness. Are they right? Dominic's smile was cold. I've held this territory for 200 years against houses far more powerful than Corvin. I'm not weak. I'm selective about which battles I fight, but you'll fight for me. I already have. He moved to the window, his silhouette dark against the pale morning light. Last night was a test. Matthias wanted to see if I'd actually defend my claim or if it was political theater. Now he knows. And what did he learn? That I'm willing to bleed for you. Dominic turned back, and the weight in his gaze made Elena's breath catch. Which makes you either incredibly valuable or incredibly dangerous. Possibly both. Elena rose, unable to sit still any longer. Then teach me the rules. If I'm going to be a piece in this game, I need to understand how it's played. Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Very well. Lesson 1, Blood Oaths. He held up his wrist, and Elena saw a faint scar barely visible. But there. Vampires bond through blood. Not feeding, but exchange. When two vampires share blood willingly, they create a connection. Emotions, thoughts, location. It fades after a few days unless renewed. Like a tracking device. More intimate than that. You feel what they feel. Know when they're in danger. His voice dropped. It's how Matthias knew I was serious about protecting you. I would have felt his presence the moment he crossed my wards if we'd been bonded. We're not, which means he's truly acting alone, without House Alliance backing this particular vendetta. Elena processed this. Can humans blood bond with vampires? Dominic went very still. Yes, but it's forbidden under Covenant law. Human-vampire bonds are considered unstable. The power differential is too extreme. The human becomes addicted to the vampire's blood, and the vampire becomes dangerously possessive of the human, like what happened to Catherine. No, the word was sharp. Catherine was turned, made vampire. That's different, a complete transformation. Blood bonding keeps the human mortal, but ties them to an immortal creature. It rarely ends well. Elena filed that information away. What else? Feeding. Dominic moved back to the table, his movements controlled but tense. We require blood to survive, but we don't require kills. Most modern vampires feed from willing donors, humans who consent in exchange for money, protection, or the euphoria that vampire venom produces during feeding. Venom, an anticoagulant in our saliva. It prevents clotting and produces a mild narcotic effect in humans. Makes feeding pleasurable for both parties when done correctly. His jaw tightened. Lisette's kill was wasteful, cruel. She drained him completely when a careful feed would have left him alive and healed within days. Elena thought of the young man in the market, his glassy eyes and the blood soaking the jewelry display. Why kill him then? Because she could. Because Matthias has convinced her that the old laws don't apply to House Corvin anymore. Dominic's hands clenched. That's what this war is really about. Not territory. Not politics. It's about whether the Covenant still matters. Or whether vampires can return to the days when we were monsters who took what we wanted from mortals without consequence. The weight of it settled over Elena. She wasn't just caught between rival houses. She was caught between two visions of what vampires could be. What do you believe? She asked quietly. Dominic looked at her, and the complexity in his expression, grief and hope and terrible loneliness, made her heart ache. I believe Catherine died because I failed to protect her from a monster who saw humans as nothing but food and toys, he said. I believe I've spent 2 centuries trying to prove that vampires can be more than our hungers, that we can honor the Covenant, protect the mortals in our care, and still survive. His voice dropped. And I believe Matthias wants to burn that belief to ash. Then we don't let him. Elena met his gaze steadily. You said I'm either an asset or a liability. Make me an asset. Teach me everything. How to survive, how to fight back, how to be more than just another human victim waiting to be rescued. Dominic studied her for so long, Elena thought he might refuse. Then slowly, he smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. Lesson 2, he said. Vampire weaknesses. Because if House Corvin comes again, you'll need to know how to hurt them. Chapter 7. When shadows Stricathy had 2 days of peace, 2 days in which Dominic taught Elena the anatomy of vampire mortality. Sunlight not instantly fatal, but weakening, painful, eventually lethal. Stakes through the heart effective only with wood from certain trees, and even then requiring precise placement. Decapitation messy but reliable. Fire the most feared, the most final. Were hard to kill, Dominic explained as they sparred in the conservatory, his movements controlled, hers clumsy but determined. But we're not invincible. Remember that. Elena blocked his strike with the wooden practice staff he'd given her. You're teaching me to kill you. I'm teaching you to survive. He disarmed her easily, the staff clattering to the floor. Again. She retrieved it, muscles burning. They'd been at this for hours. Basic self-defense, pressure points, how to use speed against an opponent who was faster. Elena had never been athletic, had spent 2 years with Marcus being told she was too weak, too soft, too dependent. But here, now, with Dominic's patient instruction and unwavering belief that she could learn, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Capable, better, Dominic said, as she executed a move that actually made him step back. You're thinking like a human fighting a vampire. Good. Use your mortality as an advantage. We expect you to be helpless. When you're not, it creates hesitation. Elena lowered her staff, breathing hard. When they come, you run. That's non-negotiable. His expression was stern. Everything I'm teaching you is last resort. If you can escape, you escape. And leave you to fight alone? Yes. No. Dominic's eyes flashed. Elena, I'm not Catherine. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. I'm not someone you have to protect from every threat. You said I could be an asset. Let me be one. They stared at each other, tension crackling between them. Then Dominic's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression went ice cold. What? Elena asked. Mrs. Carlyle. She's trapped at her apartment. 3 of Matthias's people are watching her building. He was already moving toward the door. He's using her to draw me out. It's a trap, obviously. Dominic grabbed his coat. But I can't leave her vulnerable. She's served my family for 40 years. I won't abandon her to Corvin vengeance. Elena caught his arm. Then take me with you. Absolutely not. Think strategically. Elena forced herself to sound calm, rational. They expect you to come alone, righteous and reckless. They're not expecting a human at your side. I can be misdirection. A complication. Dominic looked torn. If something happens to you, then you'll have taught me well enough to prevent it. Elena met his gaze steadily. Trust works both ways, Dominic. You've been teaching me to survive. Let me prove I learned. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. Stay close. Do exactly as I say. And if I tell you to run, I'll run. Elena lied. They both knew it. Mrs. Carlyle lived in a modest apartment building in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. Dominic parked 2 blocks away, his hands tight on the steering wheel. 3 vampires, he said quietly, his senses clearly tracking something Elena couldn't perceive. Young, maybe 40, 50 years old. Matthias sent foot soldiers, not his best people. Why? Because this isn't about killing Mrs. Carlyle. It's about making me react. Proving I'm emotionally compromised. His jaw clenched. He's building a case to take before the council that I'm unfit to hold territory because I let sentiment cloud judgment. Elena absorbed this. So we don't play into his narrative. We get Mrs. Carlyle out quietly, without a fight, if possible, Dominic's tone suggested. He knew it wouldn't be. They approached from the back alley. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, every shadow suddenly threatening. But Dominic moved with absolute confidence, and she forced herself to mirror his composure. The back entrance was locked. Dominic's hand on the handle, and the lock clicked open. Some vampire trick Elena didn't understand and didn't question. They climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. Mrs. Carlyle's apartment was at the end of the corridor, and the door was open. Dominic went absolutely still. Then he pushed Elena behind him and moved forward with predatory silence. The apartment was wrecked. Furniture overturned, pictures smashed, books torn and scattered. And in the center of the living room sat Mrs. Carlyle, bound to a chair with silver chains that smoked against her skin, not human. Elena realized with shock. Mrs. Carlyle wasn't human. Dominic, the older woman's voice was steady despite the burns. It's a trap. Their 3 vampires materialized from the shadows. They moved with inhuman speed, converging on Dominic from different angles. He met them with controlled violence, elegant, economical, lethal. But 3 against 1, even with his age and skill, was brutal mathematics. Elena saw one of them break away, circling toward Mrs. Carlyle with a knife that gleamed silver. She didn't think. Just grabbed the closest object, a heavy brass lamp, and swung with everything she had. The vampire turned at the last second, catching the blow on his forearm instead of his skull. He snarled, eyes flashing red, and Elena saw death in his expression. Then Dominic was there, wrenching the vampire away with enough force to crack ribs. "Touch her, and I'll make your ending last days," the vampire laughed. Matthias was right. "You are soft for this one." More vampires poured through the windows, not 3, but 7, 8, a dozen. To many, Dominic's expression went from controlled to desperate. "Elena, run, now." But Elena had already moved to Mrs. Carlyle, working at the silver chains with shaking hands. The metal burned to touch, but she gritted her teeth and kept working. "Foolish girl," Mrs. Carlyle hissed. "Save yourself, not happening." Elena got one chain loose. Then another. Behind her, she heard Dominic fighting the wet sounds of impact, snarls, breaking furniture. She didn't look, couldn't afford to. The last chain fell away. Mrs. Carlyle surged to her feet, no longer frail and human but something else entirely. Her eyes flashed gold, and when she smiled, Elena saw fangs. "I haven't fought in 30 years, the older woman said, rolling her shoulders. "This should be interesting." She launched herself into the fray with a roar that shook the windows. Elena stood alone in the center of chaos, brass lamps still clutched in her white-knuckled grip, watching 200-year-old vampires tear apart Matthias's soldiers with brutal efficiency. This was her life now. This violence. This impossible world. And she refused to be helpless in it. When a young vampire broke through the fighting, lunging for her with snapping jaws, Elena swung the lamp with every ounce of strength she possessed. It connected with his temple with a satisfying crack. The vampire dropped. Across the room, Dominic's eyes met hers. She saw shock there, approval, something fiercer that made her breath catch. Then the ceiling exploded. Matthias descended through the ruined plaster like a dark angel, his smile beautiful and terrible. "Dominic Ashwood," he purred, still playing hero to broken things. "When will you learn that some mortals aren't worth saving?" Dominic's voice was death itself. "When will you learn that underestimating mortals is what gets immortals killed?" Matthias laughed and the apartment erupted into true war. Chapter 8. The weight of blood, the escape through the sewers. Elena would have laughed at the glitch if she'd had breath left for laughter. Instead, she stumbled through ankle-deep water, her entire body shaking from adrenaline. Crash. While Dominic supported Mrs. Carlyle between them, the older woman vampire, Elena's mind still reeled, had taken a silver blade to the shoulder. The wound smoked and bled black, refusing to heal. "Keep moving," Dominic urged, his own face gray with exhaustion. He'd taken damage, 2 broken ribs that hadn't set right, a gash across his temple that kept seeping blood. "We're almost to the access point." They emerged in the basement of an abandoned factory 3 miles from Mrs. Carlyle's apartment. Dominic had a safe house here, sparse but functional, with medical supplies and clean clothes stashed in waterproof containers. He eased Mrs. Carlyle onto a cot, and Elena finally got a good look at her injuries. The silver had burned deep, creating wounds that wouldn't close through normal vampire healing. "I need to extract the silver," Dominic said, his voice tight with pain he was barely containing. "Elena, in the blue container, surgical tools. Bring them." Elena's hands shook as she retrieved the kit. "Tell me what to do." "Hold her steady. This is going to hurt." Mrs. Carlyle's laugh was weak. "I've survived worse, Mr. Ashwood. The Prague incident, remember? How could I forget? You broke 3 of my ribs." Despite everything, there was warmth in his voice, affection. Elena watched as Dominic worked with steady hands, extracting fragments of silver from Mrs. Carlyle's shoulder. The older vampire never flinched, but Elena saw the pain in the tightness around her eyes. "You didn't tell me she was a vampire," Elena said quietly. "You didn't ask." Mrs. Carlyle's smile was strained. "I've been with House Ashwood since 1985. Dominic turned me when I was dying of cancer. Gave me a choice, death or immortality in service to a house that actually honored the covenant. You chose servitude? I chose purpose." Mrs. Carlyle met Elena's gaze steadily. And I've never regretted it. Dominic is a good master. Better than most humans I served before the turning. The silver fragments clinked into a metal dish. The wounds immediately began to close, tissue knitting with visible speed. There, Dominic sat back, his own injuries still bleeding. You'll be weak for a few days, but you'll heal. And you? Mrs. Carlyle's eyes narrowed. Those ribs need setting, and that head wound will heal on its own. But Dominic swayed as he stood, betraying the lie. Elena caught his arm. Sit down before you fall down. I'm fine. You're bleeding and broken and pretending otherwise. Elena guided him to a second cot with more force than she'd known she possessed. Let me help. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then he sat heavily, exhaustion finally showing through his iron control. The ribs are already healing wrong, he admitted. They'll need to be broken and set properly. Elena felt her stomach turn. How? Like this. Before she could stop him, Dominic pressed both hands against his side and pushed. The crack was audible. So was his sharp intake of breath. Jesus Christ, Elena whispered. Anglo-Saxon, actually, but close enough. His attempt at humor fell flat, his face gone white with pain. The head wound will close on its own, but I need, he gestured vaguely, blood, to speed the healing. Mrs. Carlyle tried to rise. I can, you're injured. Dominic's voice was firm. You need your blood for your own recovery. Silence stretched between them. Elena felt their eyes on her, felt the weight of what they weren't asking. You need human blood, she said quietly. I have stores, refrigerated, in the second container. But Dominic's hands were shaking now, his control slipping. I just need to. He tried to stand and nearly collapsed. Elena caught him, her decision crystallizing. How does it work? The feeding? Elena, no. Dominic's eyes were fierce despite his weakness. I don't feed from unwilling humans, ever. I'm willing. You don't understand what you're offering, then explain it to me. Elena met his gaze steadily. Because you're hurt protecting me, and Mrs. Carlyle is hurt protecting both of us, and I'm the only one in this room who isn't bleeding. So explain how this works, and let me help. Dominic looked at Mrs. Carlyle, who nodded once. It won't hurt, he said finally, his voice rough. The venom ensures that. You'll feel warmth, euphoria. It's designed to be pleasurable so humans don't fight the feeding. How much will you take? Barely anything. Just enough to speed healing. You'll be dizzy for a few hours, nothing more. His jaw clenched. But Elena, once you've been fed from, you'll carry my scent. Other vampires will know you've offered blood willingly. It changes things. Changes them how? Makes you valuable, dangerous, a proven blood source. His eyes darkened. Matthias will see it as proof that you're bonded to me, that I've claimed you in more than just political terms. Elena thought about this. About Marcus, who'd claimed her through manipulation and control. About Dominic, who'd claimed her through protection and asked nothing in return. Good, she said. Let him think that. Maybe it'll make him more reckless. Dominic stared at her. You're serious. You're dying. Elena pushed up her sleeve, exposing her wrist. And I'm not watching someone else I care about die because I was too afraid to act. The admission hung between them. Someone I care about. Dominic's expression shifted. Something raw and vulnerable, breaking through his careful masks. Elena, just do it. Before I lose my nerve. He took her wrist with shaking hands, his touch gentle despite his weakness. Look at me, not at the bite, at my eyes. Elena met his gaze. Winter gray, infinite, full of things she didn't have words for. She felt his lips against her pulse point, felt his fangs sharp, precise pierce her skin. The pain lasted a heartbeat. Then warmth flooded her veins, spreading from the bite point through her entire body. It felt like sinking into a hot bath, like the first sip of wine, like sunlight on bare skin. Pleasure so intense it bordered on overwhelming. Elena's knees went weak. Dominic's arm came around her waist, steadying her, holding her close as he drank. She could feel his relief, his healing, his gratitude washing over her in waves that weren't quite emotion, weren't quite thought, just connection, deep and primal and utterly unlike anything she'd experienced. When he pulled back, his eyes had changed, still gray, but brighter, more alive. Thank you, he whispered against her skin. Elena touched his face, the gesture automatic, intimate. His skin was warmer now, color returning. The head wound had already closed, and she could see his ribs shifting as they healed properly. You're welcome, she managed. Mrs. Carlyle cleared her throat delicately. I'll just give you two a moment. She disappeared into an adjoining room despite her injuries, leaving Elena and Dominic alone in the flickering emergency lighting. Dominic still held her waist. Elena's hand still cupped his jaw. I've never tasted anything like you, he said quietly. Your blood is extraordinary, strong, vibrant, full of life and stubbornness, and he stopped himself. I should let you go. What if I don't want you to? The words surprised them both. Dominic's thumb traced her pulse point where his bite was already healing. Vampire venom worked fast. Elena, I'm a 200-year-old monster who's dragged you into a war you didn't ask for. You shouldn't want me anywhere near you. You're a man who's spent 2 centuries trying to be better than his nature, Elena countered. Who turns elderly cancer patients into vampires so they can live with purpose. Who teaches broken humans to fight back. You're not a monster, Dominic. You're just lonely. His breath caught. You see too much, or maybe you hide too little. Elena smiled. Despite everything, the danger, the exhaustion, the impossibility of this moment, what happens now? Now we rest, heal, and tomorrow, his expression hardened with resolve. Tomorrow we take the fight to Matthias. Because he's shown his hand, and it's weaker than he wants us to believe. How do you know? Because if he could have killed me tonight, he would have. Instead, he ran. Dominic's smile was cold. Which means he needs something from me. And whatever it is, I intend to find out before he gets another chance to strike. Chapter 9. In the spaces between, Worthy returned to Ashwood Manor at dawn. Elena had expected tension, vigilance, the constant preparation for another attack. Instead, she found something unexpected. Quiet. Dominic spent the morning repairing the damage from House Corvin's first assault, his movements methodical and unhurried. Mrs. Carlyle, despite her injuries, directed the replacement of broken furniture with items pulled from storage rooms Elena hadn't known existed. And Elena watched Dominic work. He'd removed his ruined sweater, working in a fitted black T-shirt that revealed the lean muscle of someone who'd spent centuries perfecting physical control. The wounds from last night were gone completely now, healed by her blood, leaving only smooth, pale skin. She found herself staring at the elegant line of his spine as he bent to lift a fallen bookshelf, the way his hands moved with careful precision. As he sorted through damaged books, salvaging what could be saved. Stop lurking and help, he said, without turning around. Elena flushed. How did you know I was here? I can hear your heartbeat. A pause. It's faster than usual. Her blush deepened. She moved to help him with the books, acutely aware of how close they were standing, how his shoulder brushed hers as they worked. What are we looking for? She asked. Anything salvageable. Some of these books are irreplaceable first editions, signed copies, volumes that don't exist anywhere else. He handled each one with reverence. Catherine collected them. She believed books were civilization's greatest achievement. Elena picked up a water-damaged volume, its pages swollen and ink blurred. This one's beyond saving. Dominic took it from her, and she saw grief flicker across his face. Jane Eyre, first edition, Catherine's favorite. He set it aside carefully. She identified with the heroine, said. They both understood what it meant to survive in a world controlled by men who didn't see their worth. Smart woman, the smartest I've ever known. He glanced at Elena. Until perhaps now, the compliment settled warm in her chest. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, sorting and stacking, rebuilding order from chaos. Tell me about her, Elena said finally. Catherine, beyond the tragedy. Who was she before everything went wrong? Dominic was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sat back on his heels, a book cradled in his hands. She was fearless, he said softly. When I came back from the war changed. Everyone else treated me like a monster. They had to tolerate. But Catherine demanded I teach her about what I'd become. She wanted to understand the biology, the limitations, the hunger. Made me explain every detail until she knew as much about vampires as I did. He smiled at the memory, and it transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. She used to quiz me, he continued. Like a teacher testing a student. What happens if you drink dead blood, Dominic? Can you cry? Do you dream? She documented everything in journals, said future generations should understand that vampires weren't just monsters, but people who'd been changed. What happened to the journals? Burned them. After she died. Couldn't bear to. He stopped. jaw tightening. It hurt too much to see her handwriting, her observations, her hopes for a world where vampires and humans coexisted peacefully. Elena touched his hand. I'm sorry. Don't be. She had 22 years of brilliant, beautiful life. That's more than many humans get. He turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. And she taught me something I've never forgotten. What? That immortality without connection is just a very long loneliness. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I've spent 2 centuries keeping people at a distance because losing Catherine nearly destroyed me. But you. He met her eyes. You make me think maybe she was right. Maybe the risk of loss is worth the reality of connection. Elena's breath caught. Dominic, I know it's impossible. You're mortal, human, caught in a situation you never asked for. And I'm a vampire who's failing spectacularly at keeping his distance. His smile was self-deprecating. But I want you to know that these days, with you teaching you, talking with you, watching you refuse to be anyone's victim, they've mattered. More than anything has mattered in a very long time. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and raw. Elena squeezed his hand. When this is over, when the 28 days are up, what happens to us? You're free to go. Live your life. Forget this ever happened. And if I don't want to forget? Dominic's expression was pained. Elena, I'm offering you freedom. Don't trade it for a half-life in vampire politics. What if I want to trade it for something else? She shifted closer, her knee touching his. You've shown me I can be strong, that I don't have to accept the cage someone else built for me. Marcus made me small. You've made me expansive, like I could take up space in the world and it would be okay. You were always allowed to take up space. You just needed permission to believe it. Then believe this. Elena cupped his face with her free hand. I'm not Catherine. I'm not asking you to protect me from the world. I'm asking you to let me stand beside you in it. Dominic closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. You don't know what you're asking. So teach me. You've taught me everything else, how to fight, how to survive, how vampire society works. Teach me what it means to choose this. Knowingly, willingly. It means danger, constant vigilance, never being fully safe. I was never safe with Marcus either. But with you, at least the danger comes with honesty. Dominic opened his eyes, and the longing in them made her ache. If I let myself want this, want you, I won't be able to let you go when the time comes. Good. Elena's voice was steady. Because I don't want you to. The distance between them evaporated. Dominic kissed her with 200 years of loneliness and longing and desperate hope. His hands cradled her face like she was something precious, breakable, worth protecting. And Elena kissed him back with all the strength she'd found in these impossible weeks, pouring everything she couldn't say into the connection of lips and breath and tangled fingers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. This is madness, he whispered. Probably. Matthias will use you against me. Let him try. Elena. Dominic. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I know the risks. I know this is complicated and dangerous and possibly doomed. But I also know that for the first time in years, I feel alive. Like I matter. Like my choices matter. And I choose you. I choose this. Whatever comes next. Something in his expression cracked open all the careful control, the protective distance, the fear of losing someone else he loved. It poured out of him in a shuddering breath. I've been alone so long, he said roughly. I don't know how to do this anymore. How to let someone in. Then we'll learn together. Elena kissed him again, softer this time. A promise. One day at a time. Behind them, Mrs. Carlyle cleared her throat. I hate to interrupt this touching moment, but we have a problem. They broke apart. Dominic was on his feet instantly, body tense. What is it, Mrs. Carlyle held up her phone, her expression grim. Matthias has called a council meeting. 3 nights from now. He's formally challenging your right to hold this territory. Dominic's face went cold. On what grounds? Emotional compromise. Specifically, your attachment to a human witness who should have been executed under covenant law. Mrs. Carlyle's eyes flicked to Elena. He's going to argue that you're unfit to rule because you've let sentiment override vampire security. He's not wrong, Dominic said quietly. No, Elena stood, squaring her shoulders. He's absolutely wrong. Because sentiment isn't weakness. It's what separates you from monsters like him. Dominic looked at her, and she saw the war in his expression. Duty versus desire, safety versus risk. 3 days, he said finally. We have 3 days to prepare a defense. To prove that protecting you isn't compromise, it's strategy. How, Mrs. Carlyle asked. Dominic's smile was sharp as a blade. By making Elena so valuable to vampire interests that the council has no choice but to uphold my claim. Chapter 10. The Council of Shadows. The council met in a place that shouldn't exist. Elena stood beside Dominic in an underground chamber that defied architecture and physics both. The ceiling soared impossibly high, supported by columns carved from single pieces of obsidian. Flames burned in braziers without fuel or smoke. And around a circular table sat 7 vampires who looked like they'd stepped from different centuries, different continents, different concepts of humanity entirely. You brought the human. The speaker was a woman whose skin held the deep brown of ancient Egypt. Her eyes lined with kohl that had probably been applied before the pyramids rose. Bold, Ashwood, or foolish, strategic, Elder Nefret. Dominic's voice carried the formal cadence of someone who'd navigated vampire politics for centuries. The human is the subject of this inquiry. She should be present for her own defense. Matthias sat across the circle, flanked by Lisette and 2 vampires Elena didn't recognize. He smiled when he saw her, all teeth and malice. Defense implies she's on trial, he said smoothly. I was under the impression this council was convened to discuss your fitness to rule, Dominic. Not hers to exist. They're the same question. Another council member spoke, a man who looked Nordic, pale as winter, with braids that hung to his waist. If Ashwood has compromised house security by protecting a witness, then both his judgment and his claim are in question. Elder Bjorn speaks truth, a 3rd vampire. This one, appearing Asian and wearing robes that might have been from the Tang dynasty, nodded gravely. The covenant exists to protect all vampires. One human witness threatens our collective security. Elena felt the weight of their gazes, predators assessing prey. She'd dressed carefully for this, in black pants and a silk blouse the color of deep wine, her hair pulled back to expose the healing bite mark on her neck. Dominic's mark. His claim made visible. Then let me address the council directly. Elena's voice cut through the chamber, clear and steady. Despite her hammering heart, silence fell. Several council members looked shocked that she dared speak. Dominic tensed beside her, but didn't stop her. I am Elena Moreno, she continued. 28 years old, former paralegal, currently under House Ashwood protection due to witnessing a covenant breach committed by Lisette of House Corvin. She met each council member's eyes in turn. I understand vampire law requires witnesses to be silenced, but I submit that silencing me would be the greater security. Breach, explain. Elder Nefret's voice was ice. Because I represent proof that the covenant can work. Elena forced herself to breathe slowly. Lisette killed a human in public. Dominic claimed me to prevent further breaches. In doing so, he's demonstrated that vampires can self-police, can hold each other accountable, can maintain secrecy through honor rather than murder. She paused. Killing me now proves Matthias's argument that vampires are monsters who can't be trusted to value human life. Protecting me proves Dominic's that the covenant means something. Pretty words, Matthias drawled. But words don't erase what you witnessed. You're a security risk that Ashwood is too compromised to eliminate. Am I? Elena turned to face him fully. Because from where I stand, I'm the only human in the city who knows what you are and hasn't run screaming to the media. I've lived in Dominic's house for 3 weeks. I've seen vampire society from the inside, and I've chosen silence. She lifted her chin. That choice has value, Matthias. Unless you're arguing that human agency means nothing. His eyes flashed red. Careful mortal, she makes a valid point. The Tang dynasty vampire Elder Zhang interrupted. A human who chooses silence is more reliable than one compelled to it. Compulsion fades. Choice does not. Choice backed by fear, Matthias countered. She's terrified of House Corvin. Of course she'll stay quiet. I'm not afraid of you. Elena's voice rang with conviction. She'd found somewhere in the past 3 weeks. I'm disgusted by you. There's a difference. Fear would make me desperate. Disgust makes me determined. The corner of Dominic's mouth twitched approval. Pride. Matthias stood, his movement serpentine and threatening. This council should see what Ashwood's strategy really is. He gestured to Elena's neck. He's fed from her, marked her, created a blood connection that violates covenant restrictions on human-vampire bonding. Murmurs rippled around the table. One feeding is not a bond, Dominic said coldly. Elder Nefret, you've reviewed the documentation. I took barely enough blood to heal combat injuries. There is no ongoing connection, no addiction, no bond. but there is attachment. Matthias smiled. I've seen how you look at her, Ashwood. How you risk everything to protect her. How you brought her here, to our most sacred space, rather than leave her vulnerable. He turned to the council. This is Catherine all over again. And we all remember how that ended. Dominic's control slipped just for a heartbeat. But Elena saw the fury, the old pain, the barely contained violence. Catherine's death was murder, he said quietly, sanctioned by a council to corrupt to stop it. Are you that council? Or have you learned that protecting humans isn't weakness, it's what separates us from the monsters humans fear? Elder Nefret raised one elegant hand, and silence fell instantly. The question before us, she said, is not whether Ashwood feels attachment. Emotion is not illegal, even for vampires. The question is whether his actions have compromised house security and by extension, the covenant itself. She looked at Elena with eyes that had witnessed empires rise and fall. You claim you choose silence. But what guarantee do we have? What prevents you from exposing us the moment Ashwood's protection ends? Elena had prepared for this question. Had spent 3 days with Dominic and Mrs. Carlyle rehearsing her answer. Because I've been given something more valuable than exposure could ever provide, she said. I've been given purpose, autonomy, the knowledge that I can be strong in a world designed to make women like me feel weak. She glanced at Dominic. House Ashwood didn't just protect me. It showed me what honor looks like, what consent means, what it means to have power and choose not to abuse it. She turned back to the council. You want a guarantee? Here it is. I will keep your secret, because I believe the covenant matters. Because I've seen what vampires can be when they choose to be more than their hungers. And because, she steadied herself, because I love a man who's spent 200 years trying to prove that monsters can choose to be heroes. I won't destroy that by breaking my word. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Then Matthias laughed cold and mocking. Love, she admits it. The connection is exactly what I claimed. Love is not a crime, Elder Bjorn rumbled. Even among vampires, it is when it blinds a house leader to security risks. Matthias leaned forward. I move for a vote. Either Ashwood surrenders his territory for gross negligence, or he executes the human witness to prove his commitment to the covenant. Those are the only logical outcomes. Elena felt ice flood her veins. Dominic's hand found hers beneath the table, squeezing once reassurance or goodbye. She couldn't tell. Elder Nefret looked between them, her ancient eyes unreadable. Before we vote, she said slowly, I would hear one more perspective. Lisette of House Corvin, you committed the breach that started this chain of events. What say you? Lisette stood, her beauty sharp as broken glass. I say Matthias is right. The human should have been silenced immediately. That Ashwood chose sentiment over security proves he's unfit, and what of your fitness? Elder Jang interrupted. You fed in public, killed wastefully, violated every tenet of discreet feeding. Should we question House Corvin's leadership as well? Matthias's expression darkened. That's not, it's precisely the point. Elder Nefret's voice cut like a blade. This council exists to uphold the covenant, not to wage political wars disguised as security concerns. She stood, and every vampire in the chamber fell silent. I call for vote, she declared. Not on Ashwood's territory. On this, should the human Elena Moreno be executed for witnessing a covenant breach, or should House Ashwood's protection claims stand?